Hey, welcome back. This is Jana from Purl Together. So, how's it going? By now, we've done our cuff right here, the top. We've done the cuff. We've done the back of the heel flap. We've turned the miraculous heel. So that's awesome. Okay, so today we're going to learn how to pick up the stitches down the sides of the heel flap and continue knitting and join all this together over the instep of the top of your heel and then start knitting the foot. And we're going to decrease it all down to back to the original number of cast on stitches that you have. And then we'll carry on knitting the foot. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so when I last left you, we had just finished purling our way back across the heel flap stitches, and we are now ready to pick up the gusset stitches here. So in order to do that, we need to knit our way back across. So if you look at your pattern, we're on page 3 under the gusset paragraph, and she talks about there's different ways to do this, but I'll just show you the way I do it, but you're the boss of your own knitting, so find what works for you. But I'm at the bottom section of that paragraph where it says knit across the heel flap, placing a marker about at the halfway point. So however many stitches you have was determined by your cast on, and also how tall or how big, what size heel flap you created. So for me, I believe I forget how many I have. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Okay, so I'm just going to knit across 7, and I'm going to place a marker because that will be the new beginning of our round. Okay, so we'll just bear with me here while I do that. 5, 6, 7. Okay, stitch markers are a wonderful thing. I just have a whole bunch of super basic, boring ones. Heidi and I actually used rubber bands one time. Heidi's a good friend of mine from Nebraska, and we were at a kind of knitting retreat girls weekend only in the mountains, and I didn't have any stitch markers, and she had these nifty little rubber bands. But I think I lost that or the cat stole it. So stitch markers are a whole nother industry. There's all kinds of cool little beautiful pretty ones that people make on Etsy. You can order them by the hundreds, I think, at Knit Picks, whatever. Anyhow, mark that. If you don't have any stitch markers, you can also just take some different colored yarn and make yourself a little loop and stick that on there. Or again, little rubber band, little piece of cotton thread, whatever. Just find yourself a way to mark the halfway. That will become the center of the back stitches as opposed to the front side stitches. All right. So now on the back, you can continue one more time knitting into the back loop, which I will. If you were doing that before, go ahead and do that one more time. If you were not, then don't worry about it. Okay, so now what we want to do, what our goal here is to pick up these stitches that are going down the edge so that we can knit the other direction, and you'll see what I mean by that. All right, so now we need to pick up these stitches that go along here, and you can see that it kind of looks like a crochet chain edge. So the idea is we're just going to poke our needle underneath the both sides or both legs or edges of that stitch and knit into it. So all you need to do here is take the point of your left hand needle and go in. You can see that first chain stitch edge. Go in under like that and simply knit into it. Now if you want to use a crochet hook or use the other needle, you can do that. It looks like you have a little bit of a split stitch there, but that's all right. We'll deal with that and get that handled. So just knit right into that. Okay, let me show you that a couple more times. So there's our next one right there. You can see that edge is where I'm going to go in and knit and just simply knit into it. Okay, that's called picking up the stitches. That's a super useful skill to have. I've knitted several things where I needed to do that. So you're going to go along and pick all these up, making sure that you keep, kind of rotating that back so that you don't pick up just one edge, or you don't accidentally want to pick up, for example, those two and leave this other edge hanging out there. So, make sure that you have the correct, you're going in at the correct spot, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so that's how that should look, okay? We have this far edge, and you're knitting into it. All right, now how many of those you have obviously depends upon how tall your heel flap was. So we're just gonna go in and knit into all of those until we get all the way down to our instep stitches. Once you get down to where we've joined, this is our cuff. I always make sure to pick up an extra 1 or 2 stitches here because I don't want to have a hole here. You can see where this horizontal piece of yarn that goes from this stitch to this stitch is usually what I use to pick up with. Okay, I'm going to do one more here. I'm going to do one more here, and then I'm going to throw in an extra pickup stitch right here. Okay, now if I just yank that up, that will leave a hole, and I do not want that. So what I do to mitigate that is I'm actually going to treat that as if it's a stitch, but I'm going to twist it. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. I picked it up. Okay, I'll just show you again. Let me drop it and I'll show you again. Okay, that's the horizontal ladder, if you will, or that's the horizontal line between this column of stitches and this column of stitches that starts the new needle. I'm going to pick this up as if it were a stitch. But if I just knit into that, it's still going to leave a hole underneath where my finger is underneath here. And I don't want that. So I need to twist that in order to take up some of that slack. I'm going to place it back onto the left needle. Then I'm going to knit into the back of it. And that's going to put a little twist in there just to tighten everything up and make it so there's not a hole. And I'm just going to knit across my instep stitches like normal. Follow the directions in the pattern if you're using double points. And she explains which needle, 1 or 2, that you should have on the back of the heel stitches. Before I knit across these front instep stitches, I'm going to go ahead and pull through my cable. If you're using magic loop, go ahead and do that because you will have all of these heel and gusset stitches will end up being on the back, and your instep stitches will end up being on the front. So go ahead and pull your cable through if you're magic looping, and then curl it around and simply knit across your instep stitches. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, we've knitted across the instep stitches. Okay, but in the same way that we wanted to pick up an extra stitch down here when we joined the other side, we want to do that here again because we do not want a hole. Okay, so I am going to pick up that extra loop that's in between. Let me get a hold of my working yarn here. I apologize for struggling to knit through the camera. This will take me some time to work it out. So I'm going to grab my other needle real quick and I'm going to just pick that. I'm going to pick up this horizontal bit between my other 2 stitches that are on the cable and then my gusset row. Put it onto the left-hand needle and then I'm going to knit into the back of it. And what that will do is twist that stitch and help there not be any holes here. If you still end up with a tiny one, you know, you can either just not worry about it or you can go back in and darn that and sew that shut if it really, really bothers you. So now what I want to do is carry on picking up these these gusset stitches here. And again, you can see where you want to go in underneath both legs of that chain stitch. Okay. Wrap around counterclockwise and pull that through. Again, use a crochet hook if that's easier for you. I just use my knitting needle because I'm too lazy to go find a crochet hook. And I'm going to end up having to transfer it onto the knitting needle anyway. So I found this is what works easiest for me. So hopefully you can see those. I'll do a few more. Make sure you see how it wants to curl in. Make sure you unroll it. Make sure you roll it toward you and you're getting under both of those legs. Now again, some people just choose to knit under one. I like the sturdiness of knitting under both. But you're the boss of your knitting. You knew I was going to say that. So we'll do that. This is the Sloth Series, so we'll do this a few more times very slowly. Then we'll get into the decreasing part because now we have picked up a whole bunch of extra stitches and we have a whole lot more stitches than we started when we cast on our original sock. So what we need to do is decrease that number of stitches back down so that the sock will fit the main part of your foot. And then you'll just knit that to the desired length. All right, this looks a little funky when we get up here to the end. Just make sure that you pick up your stitches. If you have to fudge it a little bit, it's not a big deal. Just try to determine where's the best part to pick those up. All right, now we're gonna knit back. We're up to the back of the heel, or sorry, the bottom of the heel. This is really now. Now just go ahead and knit across here. And you have a new, knit to the marker, that is your new beginning of the round. Is that marker. Okay. So I'm knitting across here. Just slip the marker over, move it along with you. All right. When we go all the way down, we want our decreases to be at the end of this needle, at the end of this size, and then at the beginning of the other needle. And the way that you remember this is you're going to have your decreases occur near the instep stitches, or the top of the foot stitches, okay? Let me get the photograph here that we had earlier, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So in this photograph, if you'll notice, is we're gonna do our decreases, and they're gonna come all the way down like this. So we wanna make sure that they're leaning the right way. We're doing a left and a right leaning decrease. And I do have a couple of videos on that in the basics playlist. But you can this is the Sloth Series, so we'll show you again. You can just follow along here. So beginning at the round, we're just gonna knit, knit, all the way to the end of the heel flap. So just knit your way all the way down to the end of this first portion where we picked up all the stitches, okay? So this is the left side of the flap, and you can see how we're knitting all the way to the end. Well, we're not knitting all the way to the end. Actually, stop when you get 3 stitches from the end. Now is when we're going to do our first decrease. And since this will be a right leaning decrease, your decreases want to slant toward the toe of your sock, just like in the photograph on the pattern. So if we want to do a right leaning decrease, we will just simply knit these 2 stitches together. Okay, so just go in both of them and you're knitting them together. It's really that simple. And then you just knit the very last one. Okay, so again, knit until you get to 3 stitches from the end, knit those 2 together, and then just knit the last one. Okay, I'll show you again, not to worry. All right, now I am pulling my cable through because I want my needle here, and we're going to turn our work over and simply knit across the instep stitches. All right, you know, there's pros and cons to everything. You have to manage the cable when you're doing magic loop, but when you have DPNs, you have to manage all those pokey points. So, you know, it's just personal preference. They're both perfectly functional. I am simply knitting across the instep stitches. That's your little breather. So just take a break and enjoy that. All right, I've knitted across the instep stitches here. That was our easy time. All right, now what we're gonna do here, this is when you look at the back of the sock, this is the right side of your heel flap and heel turn. This is the right hand side if you're looking at the back of your row where your marker is. Now, what we want to do here is, if we look at our sock, we want this to be a left-leaning decrease, so the decrease points to the toe. So just simply knit the first stitch. Now, here is a good place to be mindful, particularly of those ladders. Make sure you snug that up. And then what we want to do is a left-leaning decrease, which will be a slip, slip, knit. Now, since one of my viewers pointed out I had done things a little differently, I'm going to show you the way that she recommended, which is in fact easier than my previous demonstration. So slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, take your left hand needle and simply go underneath and then knit those off, okay? All right, let me show you that again. Let me take that out and I'll show it to you again, because that is a little bit more. There's a couple more steps than just knitting together to make a right leaning decrease. So knit the first stitch and make sure you snug that up, and then slip as if to knit, slip, slip as if to knit, take your left needle underneath, and then knit that off. So you're effectively knitting through the back loop of both of those, which turns them a little bit and makes them lay flat. All right, and now just knit to the end of your round. So you've made your first decrease round. We will be decreasing every other round. So you just did one. So now this next time, you're home free. Just knit around plain. All right, I will do that, and then I'll show you. If you're Netflix knitting or you have people talking to you, I'll show you how you can tell the difference. And so if you carry on like this and you're not really keeping track on a piece of paper, and you don't know if it's a decrease round or a knit plain round, it's easy to, you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see your work and to be able to tell which is a decrease, what you've done the previous row, therefore what you need to do on the row that you're on. Okay, so let's say I get interrupted, which happens frequently around here. I'm sure it does to you as well. Let's say I get interrupted and I'm cruising up to the end of this first section and I know that I need to do a right leaning decrease, but I'm like, dang, what row am I on? Did I do that last time or did I not? Well, when you get to 3 stitches to the end, you'll be able to see. All right, hold on here and I'll show you. When you get to 3 to the end, this is when you would need to do a decrease if you were going to. But I can plainly see here that I had knitted 2 of them together before. Well, we'll go ahead and get that one out of the way. Now look, there's 2 loops down there. So you know you did a decrease last time you were here. So nope, not this row. This is our knit it plain row, okay? Now what I'll show you is if you're not sure, and it looks like that, where you can tell, oh yeah, well, there's our previous decrease down there, see it, where there's 2, and there's our knit plain one. So if you come cruising up to these 3 stitches, you're like, oh, nope, those look plain, that looks plain, yep, we need to decrease this stitch and this stitch, knit those together. So hopefully that helps if you get interrupted and you'll be able to tell. All right, I've knitted across the instep stitches and now I'm on to the right side where I want to have a left leaning decrease. You can see that I did that the previous row before because you can tell that's leaning. So I'm just going to knit right on by this one. This is my knit plain row. And again, make sure you snug up that first one so you don't have a ladder, and then knit those and carry on. And you can see how that's going to look there, how it's leaning to the left. And go ahead and knit back to the marker, and that will be the end of round 2. You're going to repeat these 2 rounds, decreasing every other row or every other round until you get back to your original number of cast-on stitches. So for me, that will be getting back to my original 44. And so whatever that is for you. So I can't tell you how many times you're going to repeat these 2 alternating rounds because it just depends. It depends on a lot of factors, including how many stitches you picked up and what your original cast-on amount was. So be sure to ask any questions, though. Shoot me a message, comment in the Facebook group, comment on this video down below. I will get back to you just as soon as I can, usually the same day. I do have a life, as everyone else does, but this is important to me, so I will make my best effort to return your comments and questions in a timely way. Okay, so let's say I've been interrupted and I can't remember if this is a plain row or a decrease row. Well, I can tell when I knit to the end, the 3 at the end, and again, you can see that the row below down here was my decrease, and the last one I did was a plain one. So now I want a right leaning decrease. So I'm just going to knit these 2 together. Simple. And then knit the last one. Okay? Easy. You've got this. Okay, knit across your instep stitches, and then we'll do a left leaning decrease. So I'm going to tighten that up a little bit, and I'm going to knit the first stitch, snug that up, Left leaning decrease is a slip, slip, knit. So slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit. Take your left needle underneath those two. Whoops, being careful not to split a stitch. Okay, there you go. And knit that off. So you're just knitting into the back loop. Now I give that a little tug. The reason I did that is just to draw a little bit more yarn through so everything's not so tight. I want it to be tight to snug it up here, but I don't want it to be so tight that it's going to pucker. So you'll get to know your own tension and whether you do or do not need to do that. But, you know, it's not a crisis in the beginning. So that completes our second decrease round. And now I'm just knitting back to the marker. And then, what's next? We just finished our decreased round. So now we have a plain round. All right, so I will leave you to do that, alternating your plain round and your decreasing round. And then we'll check in and I will show you what it looks like. But again, please do not hesitate to ask questions. And I will encourage you to ask questions in the Facebook group or in the Ravelry group, which I need to set up a thread for this. And the reason for that is if you private message me with your questions, I don't mind that necessarily, but I would be willing to bet there's other people in the group with the same questions that you have. So rather than me having 20 people bombarding me, I'm not saying this has happened, but in theory, if I had a whole bunch of people all sending me private messages where if I answered one person in the group, then I've essentially answered anyone else that may have that same question. So as new members and beginner knitters, we're all about supporting you. So please ask your questions in the group. And then that way, if someone else has the same issue, they can use the search bar and possibly find the information that they need. And that will lessen the amount of times I have to repeat myself. Okay, so I appreciate your cooperation with that. And since I've been rambling, can you tell, am I doing a knit row or a decrease row? I'm going to be doing a plain knitting row, right? Because you can see that I did a decrease that time. Okay, so I believe I am finished decreasing my gusset stitches. So I've gone and repeated those two alternating rows, a decrease row and a plain row, until I am back down to my original cast on number of stitches. Okay, so now you're just going to continue knitting and knitting and knitting round and round for the portion, for the foot portion of the sock. And you're going to want to stop at about 2 inches before the desired length of your foot. So if you have, if the sock recipient is someone that lives with you and you can try it on, that's great. If not, have your intended recipient, if you can, stand on a ruler and you're going to want to measure from the back of the heel to the toe and then stop knitting about 2 inches before that, or about where the base of your pinky toe is, as indicated in the pattern. Okay, so carry on with that. We will learn about decreasing the toe and how I like to finish off next time. All right, I'll see you next week for episode 4.